Hello and welcome back to 3+1 Media, where we talk about people, politics, and pop culture. And today in politics, we're talking about Alabama Senator Katie Britt, who delivered the Republican response to President Joseph Robinette Biden's State of the Union. Now, if you don't know who Katie Britt is, she is the junior senator from the state of Alabama. Senator Tommy Tuberville is the senior senator. And she's only been in Congress since 2023. She ran against former Senator Mo Brooks, and she beat him soundly. She was endorsed by Trump, but after Trump first endorsed her competitor, Mo Brooks, first he endorsed Brooks, but when he realized that Katie was leading the polls, he switched over and then started to support her. No surprise, that happens in Trump world all the time. Bigly happening. Now, many people saw her State of the Union address, and the response to it has not been positive. People are coming out of the woodworks to attack the speech, and I think that maybe people are being a little bit unfair. Now, don't make any mistake here. What she said, her whole video was pretty heinous. It was very much the stuff that villain errors are made of. But I think people are over-exaggerating because men in the Republican Party do this all of the time and really are the attacked. Now, personally, I am not on here to pass a lot of judgment about what Katie said, because as a man in social media commentary, I don't feel as though it is my place. I feel as though that is a place of women who are from Katie's same group. So I have found some of my favorite voices on social media to share with you some of their thoughts about what Katie Britt had to say. And let's start with Alabama's own Beth Blue Dot.
Hi, I'm an Alabama mom at my kitchen table, and this video is for Katie Britt. I don't know what happened last night. I don't have to tell you that you came off as really disingenuous at best, and at worst kind of psychotic. I don't know what happened there. If you were like overcoached, definitely ill-advised, or maybe you sounded so fake because you don't believe what you were saying. I think we know some of the same people, and I suspect that it's the latter. I was up until 2 o'clock in the morning scrolling on Twitter. I haven't seen backlash like this in a really long time. And honestly, it made me so angry because the men in your party have been doing and saying the most unacceptable shit for a really long time, and they're still around. But then you give a speech that I know you didn't write, that you probably rehearsed 100 times in front of 100 different people, and 100 different people signed off on it. It was weird, and now your career, it's not good. It might be over, but I don't think that it has to be. I actually think this could be the beginning of something really great, but you would have to choose women over your party. You'd have to be really brave and choose women over your party, the party that set you up at a kitchen table, no less, and knocked you down. Alabama has had a really hard couple of weeks, and we are in desperate need of leadership. And I think everyone is just so desperate for a government that isn't so dysfunctional. We want people who work for us. We're tired of the political theater. It's so obnoxious. We're tired of the fear mongering and lack of action, lack of respect, and just tired of all of the distractions, because that's what so much of this is. Last night you told a story, probably in too much detail, about a woman who was trafficked and raped, and the point was the border. It was about stoking fear about the border. But the thing is, you and I both know that trafficking happens everywhere, in our own backyards, all of the time. Every day I see another headline where a pastor or a youth pastor has been arrested for SA or possession of child SA materials. Our churches are crawling with predators. No one ever talks about that, but the church is crawling with predators because, of course, predators are going to find places where there is a lot of trust and no accountability, very few, if any, consequences when they're caught. In 2022, the Southern Baptist Convention released a previously secret list of sexual abuse allegations. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of victims and abusers who were never held accountable. Some were still in active ministry even. And then just this week, the Department of Justice concluded a 1.5-year-long investigation, and they didn't bring any charges. They're not bringing any charges. Women and children are not safe in this country, but it's not because of Joe Biden's border policies. It's because white men in power protect each other. They can literally get away with murder. And if you don't believe me, ask Angie Solomon in Tennessee. You're right. Families are hurting. They're struggling. They're struggling to put food on the table. But it's not Joe Biden's fault. First of all, we have a handful of mega corporations that produce most of our food that is horrible for us, that contains all kinds of chemicals and things that are illegal in most countries. Not only are they poisoning us, they are price gouging us while raking in record profits. Families are struggling because our healthcare system is broken beyond repair. The average American family is a cancer diagnosis away from medical bankruptcy. Low-income families in red states are struggling because we won't expand Medicaid. Rural hospitals are closing. Maternity wards are closing because of our abortion laws. Medical professionals, their hands are tied, and women are suffering. Educators are in this country. They were already overworked and underpaid, and now you have groups like Moms for Liberty absolutely terrorizing them. They're scouring libraries for anything that doesn't reflect their personal religious beliefs and then demanding that the books are removed, sometimes in schools where they don't even have children. Everyone's so distracted by the chaos that no one talks about how these groups are funded by billionaires who have an agenda to defund public schools, ruin public schools so that our public tax dollars can be funneled to private schools that can and will no doubt discriminate against Black children and children with IEPs and 504s. Schools that will not be held to the same standards as public schools. School choice is just another scam meant to line the pockets of the very wealthy at the expense of the middle class. And speaking of, a lot of middle class families are going to owe the IRS money this year because the tax cuts that you all delivered in 2017, they expired for them, but they were permanent for corporations. Families in this country are struggling and terrified because gun violence is out of control. There are a lot of empty seats at kitchen tables like mine because your party is beholden to the NRA. Finally, LGBTQ plus families are hurting because your party made the decision to use gender identity and sexuality as a political issue, as a wedge issue to rally your base, and you know it. And as a result, this country is becoming increasingly hostile to the LGBTQ plus community, including children. I beg of you, leave these children alone. Find another wedge issue, find something else, like literally anything else. Katie Britt, you're at a crossroads today. You can double down on what you said last night, or, and I'm sure this is a long shot, but a girl can dream. You can get on the right side of history and choose women over your party. Thank you.
Senator Britt is the youngest woman to ever serve in the Senate and the first woman from the state of Alabama to do so as well. She did bring to the table a lot of experience, and that really caused a lot of people to question, why would they position her as this housewife? Literally, her State of the Union rebuttal started off with the fact that she was a housewife and a mother, and that was the highlight of what she brought to the table, not the historic accomplishment of being the first female to serve the United States Senate from the state of Alabama. Stars fall on Alabama. It's the heart of Dixie. So that to me was a little bit surprising, and it wasn't just to me. Take a look at this.
As if things could get worse for Katie Britt, Tommy Tuberville has now come out and said that her performance was good and she was picked as a housewife. Katie Britt is not a housewife. She's a United States Senator. She worked for Senator Shelby. She is the first woman ever to be elected to the Senate from the state of Alabama. But to them, she is a performative housewife. You want us to believe that this party supports women in the workplace and women in politics. They put you in a kitchen to give the Republican rebuttal to a State of the Union address in front of the entire country from a kitchen. What's crazy is I know a lot of people that knew you growing up, Katie, a lot of people that danced with you. You weren't always like this. I don't know what you were, but according to people who know you, you damn sure weren't a trad wife, Handmaid's Tale remake. I guess I kind of thought of you as like a Caitlin Collins, who we know is conservative. I mean, we were raised in Alabama. We all have some conservative values in us, but those of us who can think for ourselves could see right through you. You're the youngest woman ever elected to the United States Senate. And instead of boasting about that as an accomplishment for yourself, you let them make you use it as a dig at Joe Biden from your kitchen. You said Joe Biden's out of touch. You think the border is the biggest issue for women in Alabama. Bless your heart. You are out of touch. Spare us the theatrics. We all know that you helped write that border bill, and it was a great bill. You know that. You could have used that as a huge resume builder. Instead, you fell in line behind Donald Trump and traded in all of your hard work for a man who only endorsed you because Mo Brooks made the tragic mistake of telling his supporters that we needed to move past 2020. That's all it took for Trump to pull his endorsement from Mo Brooks and give it to you. And you think he's going to support you forever. You also had the nerve to call Joe Biden divisive, the guy who said things like, I don't care if you live in a blue state or a red state, the guy who used the phrase all Americans dozens of times in his speeches. That guy is more divisive than the guy who said that we need to root out all of the evil Democrats and liberals. That's half the country, Katie. That's people like me, your constituent. That is divisive. You think that the Democratic Party is more divisive than the party that says if our guy doesn't win, we're going to start a civil war, secede? I've heard Democrats make a lot of claims about what will happen if Biden loses and Trump wins, but attacking their own government has never been one of them. The biggest concern is the fact that our allies in Europe are terrified of a second Trump term. Not our adversaries. They're pulling for it. Sweden just joined NATO. Sweden! Because they're terrified that Trump will win again and let Putin march his way through Europe. That will mean boots on the ground for American citizens. And the way you tried to imply that Joe Biden was not cognitively there, after we all just watched him give a near impeccable State of the Union address, talking to the entire nation for over an hour. Dementia doesn't just go away when the cameras turn on, Katie, especially not at night. Telling the American people not to believe their own eyes and ears might work on the poorly educated, but the rest of us were incredibly insulted. And since you brought up Laken Riley, let's talk about her for a second. Your party invited Laken's family to the State of the Union address. You knew that. You knew that they declined that invite and they asked for privacy. You took the time to exploit her death. Your party made buttons. They let Marjorie Taylor Greene dress up like a clown, screaming, "Say her name," as if we all weren't appalled by her senseless murder. Senseless murders in this country are not exclusive to illegal immigrants. You know what is exclusive to one demographic? Mass shootings. 99% of them are committed by white men, white American men. Using your logic, we should just ban all white men from America and we could solve mass shootings. You told a very heartfelt story about a woman who had been raped while failing to mention that you are supporting a rapist for president, and failing to mention that the woman you were so compassionate towards, you would force that woman to carry her rapist baby. You said that your party wants to protect IVF. Did you listen to the Senate hearings in Alabama? You didn't, because it was very clear that the men in our government are not okay with IVF existing as it does currently. In fact, one of them called it a silent Holocaust. Their solution to this is to only create embryos that will be implanted. Katie, what is the point of IVF if you can't rule out the genetic conditions that caused the infertility to begin with? If you believe life begins at conception, you do not support IVF, period. It wasn't just Democrats who thought that your speech was appalling. Your own party torched you. Look at what the guys you're working for said about you. You should have been tucking your kids into bed. Women hate other women. What women want and are attracted to is a strong, masculine, authoritative man. Steve Deese, conservative podcaster, said, "I cannot believe it's real. It's the worst and most cringe political performance I've seen." George here said, "We could have had Josh Hawley, Tuberville, Vance. Anyone could have done a much better job. Competence over pretty next time, please." Charlie Kirk thinks that you should smile more. You're a sweet mom in person. I'm not gonna lie, some of these are pretty harsh. I mean, based on your performance last night, can you blame them for saying stuff like this? I just don't get it, Katie. On behalf of women in Alabama, you embarrassed all of us last night when you let them put you in a kitchen. Republicans have never supported women, and they never will. They put you right where they think you belong. And when you sell your soul to the devil, you're gonna get burnt.
Nobody puts Katie Britt in a corner, but the Republicans will put her in a kitchen.
My name is Katie Britt, and I have the honor of serving the people of the great state of Alabama in the United States Senate. However, that's not the job that matters most. I am a proud wife and mom of 2 school-aged kids, my daughter Bennett and my son Ridgway.
And that was as far as I could get before I authored this tweet. I was like, is this real? Did they send an AI person? I said Brooklyn and Ridgway deserve answers, but it's really Bennett. Close enough. This is the worst local theater I've ever seen. Can't believe I'm agreeing with him, but yeah, since I studied political science in 2001, I have never seen anything this awful. And I'm not the only one that thinks so. What the hell am I watching? Said Republicans. For the most important rebuttal to a speech in the entire year, you send this woman to the kitchen? with this weird fake voice, like so much whispering. Why? Apparently it's known as a fundy voice, like a Christian fundamentalist. And then I remembered, yeah, Michelle from the Duggar family does the same thing. I recognize this voice.
We see you. We hear you. And we stand with you. Never forget, we are steeped in the blood of patriots who overthrew the most powerful empire in the world. We walk in the footsteps of pioneers who tamed the wild. We now carry forward the same flame of freedom as the liberators of an oppressed Europe. And when we gaze upon the heavens, never forget that our DNA contains the same ingenuity that put man on the moon.
I'm so scared. Why so much smiling and whispering? It was so uncomfortable at so many moments that I was getting tweets like this. Are we watching a hostage video? Because why is her voice and behavior scaring me? It was straight up Get Out level vibes. It was so bad that Republicans couldn't even use sound bites. They had to just put her words on pictures. Wow. People said it was like a really long ASPCA commercial without the Sarah McLachlan music. Bennett and Ridgway are going to be so disappointed. All of this on International Women's Day, which more than a few people picked up on. I was like, listen, this is like arguably their most important moment. Not only do they put her in a kitchen, right? But they put her in this pricey luxe kitchen when the rest of America's struggling and she's trying to commiserate with us. Stop. I will say my thread is glorious. And so for that, I would like to thank Katie Britt for making Twitter great again.
And I didn't disagree with all of what Senator Britt had to say when she said this.
Never could have imagined what my story would entail. To think about what the American dream can do across just one generation, in just one lifetime. It's truly breathtaking. But right now, the American dream has turned into a nightmare for so many families. The true, unvarnished state of our union begins and ends with this. Our families are hurting. Our country can do better.
I found myself agreeing, like, these things are true. This is what America is like. Some things have become a nightmare, but not because of Joseph Robinette Biden being our president. These things that were happening before President Biden became president. These things really took root under the previous administration, and it is up to President Biden to kind of undo a lot of the harm that has been caused to this country by white nationalism, by Christo fascism, by a number of movements that have really sought to divide this country and that are winning in a lot of places like where Senator Britt is from. Most viral portion of her speech was an attack on migrants who are in this country illegally from other nations and have not gone through proper immigration protocols to be here. And she gave us this example.
When I took office, I took a different approach. I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12. She told me not just that she was raped every day, but how many times a day she was raped. The cartels put her on a mattress in a shoebox of a room, and they sent men through that door over and over again for hours and hours on end. We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America, and it is past time, in my opinion, that we start acting like it.
That horrific and horrendous example truly did garner, I would hope, from a lot of people, an emotional response. And the response was justified, but was the response grounded in truth if what she said was not grounded in truth? Well, take a look at this.
So you have no doubt seen this woman on your For You page at various points today. That is Senator Katie Britt, the junior senator from the state of Alabama, who delivered the Republican response to Joe Biden's State of the Union last night. It was weird, But the part that was the weirdest for me, the part that was the most off, was this.
When I took office, I took a different approach. I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12.
So I immediately had questions. Who was this woman? How did she meet her? How did she get her to tell her this story? Also, she seems to be describing something that had happened over the process of years. She said that it started when this woman was 12, and she says that she's a woman now, so it seems that some time has passed. How much of this happened on the border? What country did it happen in? Did it happen before Joe Biden was president? Senator Britt, right after that, stated pretty directly what side of the border it happened on, or at least she implies it very strongly.
And we wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America.
All right, so there's the answer. It happened in the United States. Or did it? So I looked a little bit to see if I could figure out what Senator Britt was talking about here. And I found it pretty easily. Senator Britt has told the story over and over and over again since going on this trip. So all I had to do was look for details of the trip, see if there was any information about who she talked to, and if there was any more information about this case there. And I think I found it pretty easily. So in January 2023, Senator Britt, who had just become the junior senator from Alabama, traveled to southern Texas to the Del Rio district near the border of Mexico with two other Republican senators, Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee and Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi. And Senator Blackburn had all of the information about it on her website, her senatorial website. During this trip, among other scheduled visits, the senators had what they described as a round table, although you can see it's not a round table, it's a long table on which they are sitting on one side of it. It's a press conference. They were there with a Fox News contributor, Sarah Carter, who often does sort of the xenophobic anti-immigration coverage, as well as a Mexican congresswoman who's become an anti-human trafficking activist, as well as this woman, who the senators identify as Carla Jacinto Romero. All I had to do was click on Carla Jacinto Romero's name, that hyperlink, on Senator Blackburn's page, and it took me to this. This is Carla Jacinto Romero's testimony to Congress from 2015 about her experiences in Mexico. And if you scroll down, you see it took place between 2004 and 2008. Now, I don't know what they put in the textbooks in Alabama these days, but Joe Biden wasn't the president of the United States in 2004 or 2008. He wasn't even the vice president of the United States. That wouldn't happen until 2009. In 2004 to 2008, the president of the United States was George W. Bush. Vice president was Dick Cheney. And none of that really matters here because these events didn't happen in the United States. These crimes didn't take place in the United States or even near the border. They took place in Mexico, in Guadalajara, in Mexico City, and other parts of Mexico. Does U.S. policy have a huge role to play in the Mexican drug wars? Do Mexican drug cartels get their weapons from the United States? Do they get most of the money that they make selling and transiting drugs to the United States? Absolutely. But this didn't happen when Joe Biden was president. It happened 20 years ago when George W. Bush, a Republican, was president. And Jacinto Romero didn't share her story with Senator Britt. Britt tells it like she's like sitting by the banks of the Rio Grande, like holding her hand, like getting her to tell her the story that she won't tell anyone else. I mean, that's sort of the affect that you get watching that video, right? This is a professional activist. I mean, I'm sure she went through the things that she went through. I'm not discounting that at all. And she's clearly a very brave person who has overcome a lot in her life. But she tells this story in public. This is her testifying in front of Congress in 2015, 9 years ago, almost a decade ago. This is what she does. She goes around and tells people this story. And she did it for the senators in January 2023. And yet this senator has gone around repeatedly for the past year and change, telling the story over and over again as if this woman had confided something in her and as if she was describing actions that had taken place on or even near the U.S.-Mexico border during Joe Biden's presidency. I don't even know what to say except that is just fundamentally dishonest. It goes beyond misleading. She said it in the piece of the video that you saw before. She says, we wouldn't accept these things if they happened in a third world country. Well, they did. Mexico is definitionally a third world country because it wasn't aligned directly with the Soviet Union or the United States. And it is also colloquially a third world country in the sense that it is a non-English speaking country of the global South that is more poor than the United States on average, although it is actually better off than a lot of other countries, even Latin America. But that's neither here nor there. It didn't happen in the United States. It's not an example of something that happened recently, or it's not even an example of something that happened on the border, and there's certainly not something that happened under Joe Biden. So why would she share that story? It seems very clear to me that what she's trying to do is she's trying to create an association in people's minds between Joe Biden, the border, Mexicans, Latin, people of Latin descent, something like that, and sexual violence. That's what she's going for. And she's doing it on the basis of what you can only say is just an out and out lie. She knows that she knows when this woman's experiences happened because this woman has talked about them repeatedly. I'm sure she talked about them and gave very specific indications of when it happened at that press conference that she was at in Del Rio. It must have been very obvious to her at the very least that she wasn't talking to somebody who had recently been 12 years old. After I watched this, I looked up her spokesperson, which is never easy to find these days, but I found an email address for him. I sent him an email. I asked him for comment, if he could explain what the senator meant, if there was some other incident that she was talking about that I hadn't found. They haven't gotten back to me. If they do, I will update then. But for now, it just looks like she just got on national television and lied about something really horrific and really important, and for her own personal and her party's political gain.
One of the funniest pieces of commentary about Senator Britt's response came from a podcast that I listened to called Politically Georgia, and this is what Bill Nigut had to say.
Memorable or impactful. It was just bad all around.
She was terrible.
Saturday Night Live is going to, I don't know if Saturday Night Live is in season, but if they are, they're going to have a time with that green blouse on Saturday night.
We all have a friend who's involved in politics who watched her when she was campaigning for the Senate seat, who thought she was fantastic and has said to me repeatedly, this is a rising star. Wait till you see her. She was terrible. Not only was her message Trumpian, we're living in a nightmare, but I said to my friend in a text this morning, she performed like a frustrated woman who wanted to audition for a community theater production of Streetcar Named Desire. And about 10 seconds into the monologue, they said, next, Yeah, bad. All right.
I think people are being a little bit overly critical of Senator Britt, but that's just my opinion. I want to know from you in the comments, am I wrong? Was this really as bad as people are saying? Or was it just the average expected response that I think that I've come to expect from Republicans and leadership? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we can debate and talk about it further. With that being said, be well, be blessed, and no matter what you do, keep pushing.